everyone. You are listening to People No Wait, the podcast for people. This is season 2, the all inclusive table. I'm your host, Sanya Sharma, and you're listening to episode 22. Welcome once again to another new episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And well done us for maintaining the momentum in the podcast. We're talking about psychological safety. Now, on psychological safety, have you ever come across situations where you meet someone and they look so lovely and they look so radiant, and then you hear a story about them that, oh my god, this happened to them and they went through this and they went through that, and you would have never guessed by looking at them that they have had such difficult stretch, or they have had to go through so many difficult events, because they just look so radiant, as if they have just not seen the negative side of life, or that they have had a very protected upbringing, which may not be the case. So how is that they're able to be so positive and maintain that positivity and reflect these positive emotions of hope, trust, inspiration? Because when you are not psychologically safe, or when you go through difficult events, these are the emotions get compromised the most. I'm sure we've all heard of situations where people have had to quit situations where they didn't feel psychologically safe. And the first thing that they had to do was rebuild their own sense of self confidence, build confidence in people, build this relationship of trust in any business, in any equation, in our social settings. Trust is so important. And to maintain that emotion despite going through difficult patches is quite difficult, and to do that all by yourself, because when you go through difficult situations, you will navigate these situations on your own for to a very large extent. So yes, how do they do it? And there's no magic in it. And I don't think it's fair to say, oh my god, maybe all those stories about them is a lie, or maybe it's not. In my experience, the reason most people are able to do it is because they have just developed healthy coping mechanisms, or a way to process their emotions, or a way to infuse psychological safety into their daily life. Now, how do other people do it? I don't know. I can share with you something that has worked for me, and I'm doing this on request. We have reached that stage on this podcast when someone has requested me to do an episode based on something I spoke about earlier. And this is something I spoke about in my first season: reflective exercises, journaling exercises, because I rely on them heavily to maintain my emotional states. Because I feel some people enjoy talking to other people, but for me, that is a bit difficult, because I think when you're talking to other people, they are more likely to be in their own emotional state. So their emotional state is going to affect your emotional state. So for me, that doesn't really help. It might help speaking to somebody who's quite stoic and who is very unemotional. But again, when you're talking to another person, I just feel a lot of emotions come into play anyway. So when you're looking for a space, a safe space to cultivate psychological safety, or to unwind, or to balance your mood, or to balance your emotional state, I definitely use reflective exercises and journaling. So in this short episode, I'm going to talk about these 4 journaling exercises that I have used, that have helped me to maintain my emotional state, or to maintain my personal psychological safety in challenging situations. And I'm sure this will be of benefit to a lot of people. And I'm more than happy to talk about it in more detail in my episodes based on the feedback I receive on this episode. So the first writing exercise that I use is, actually, before I go into that, I also want to talk about the purpose of writing. Sometimes I think I have actually been questioned quite a bit on having writing as a hobby. People don't understand it, because when you have writing as a hobby, you're not that visible outside. I'm either writing in a cafe, or I'm writing in the morning before I go to work, or I'm writing on my phone in my notes. And that's a hobby, and I really enjoy it. It works for me just well with my personality. Many people don't understand it, but I definitely think writing is very, very powerful. Writing is powerful to ground ourselves. Writing is powerful to learn how to speak up. Writing is also powerful to boost our sense of confidence, to boost our emotions, to validate our emotions, and also to process our emotions and our perspectives. And as I've said, to also cultivate a sense of psychological safety. So I don't take it very well when people criticize having writing as a hobby. I think it is super powerful, and I would only encourage more people to write more, not just from a business development perspective. Like we all know, everybody's writing on LinkedIn these days. From a business development perspective and technical matters, yes, that is important, but life is not just about technical expertise. To be expert in your field or to write those technically challenging field articles, you also have to be in a state of mind that propels you to do that. And for me, that is important. And the tool I find quite useful is writing. So not just as a creative writing hobby, but for me, I think writing as a survival tool is very important. And that's how these four journaling exercises fit in. That's where they fit in. So number one is what I call the no filter writing. Now, in no filter writing, what um, I know I recommend, or at least I've learned, is you just get up and say you are in a scenario which is riling up some negative emotions in you, or you're feeling quite intense emotions, and you may not feel safe in relaying these emotions directly to someone because you don't know how they're going to take it. Because the other problem these days in human interaction is not everybody knows how to deal with emotions. So, and you don't want to be in a position where your emotions are used against you or someone's not understanding what you're trying to say. But it's also not good to bottle things up in yourself, because then it starts developing into a thought loop. So what you really need to do is break that thought loop within your brain and make sure that you're not going down a downward spiral, and that things you are able to see things in perspective. So what helps me then, or has helped me, or the technique I found useful, is just take a sheet of paper or your journal and just write down everything that comes to your mind about a specific situation. It could be that you're angry about it, it could be you're super excited about it, it could be you're having irrational emotions, irrational expectations, irrational anger, whatever it is. No one's judging, and write as if no one's ever going to read it. There is a saying, right? Like you should dance like no one's watching. So you should just write as if no one's going to read it. It's your sacred space, and you just went out everything on that piece of paper. It could be one sheet, two sheets, three sheets. Maybe you have to do it for a day, for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days before it's out of your system. And then just take a break from that piece of writing, hide it somewhere, lock it if you don't want others to see it, store it, just use an invisible ink, whatever you want to do, keep it in a safe space. And then a week later, go back to what you've written and read it as a neutral observer, as a third party. So think that this is not your piece of writing. Imagine it's someone else's piece of writing that has come to you and now you're reading it. And what do you think about it? What do you think is happening in this piece of paper? What is the overall sense you are getting as to where these emotions are coming from? What do you think is the core issue? What makes sense? What does not make sense? What um, can you do to tone it down? And I think that really helps with perspective building, because when you have everything on paper, you realize how you are thinking. You get a chance to, why was I thinking like this? And you also get the extent to which you're feeling something, the intensity that you're feeling something. And that's a helpful indication. So, say something has upset you, your writing will indicate, okay, why was I so upset about it? And then you start asking these prodding questions, that why was it so upsetting? Why are you feeling so riled up about it? What is the core thing? The more you keep asking why in your piece of writing, the more you'll come closer to figuring out that trigger point for yourself. Oh, I'm feeling bad about in this situation because I felt that I should have been the person who should have gotten credit for this, or I should have been the person who should have done that work, or I should have, or like this piece of work that I've done should have been taken into account. So you figure out the core emotion that's at stake. And once you figure that out, you are more likely to find a constructive way to put your case forward as opposed to dealing with these things in a more volatile emotional state. So, and that is difficult if you are already dealing with lots of emotions in your head. So, it's important to first clear your mind, declutter your brain. And some people use outdoor activities for it, like they might go box it out, or they might go and play a game and get over it. But for me, that doesn't work because unless I see what I'm thinking, it's very difficult for me to understand why I'm thinking something. But once I see it written, I'm like, oh, fine, this is why I was thinking something. This is what it actually means. And this is what, in summary, I am upset about, or this is in summary what I'm scared about, or this is what is, say, stopping me from speaking up about a certain thing. Say you're fearful of speaking up um, in a situation because you fear backlash or you fear that this is going to be held negatively against you. So you write on everything, all your fear and your anxiety, and you realize where you are exaggerating it, what is the most realistic scenario, and how can you find the most realistic step you can take in light of all these emotions you're feeling. So this exercise is not going to help you draft that step, but it's definitely going to help you come up with that why or that core emotion, which you should keep in mind when drafting that next step in your quest to achieve whatever psychological safety you want to achieve in a disturbed emotional state. The second form of writing that has helped me is what I call as the staircase writing. Now, staircase writing is what I've used when you're trying to move from a not so helpful emotional state into a helpful emotional state. And if you are a fan of psychology and if you're read into it, you would understand that we function in our emotional state fluctuates quite a bit. Some of it is in our control, some of it is in not, and it's you can't control how external stimulus affects you, but it's on us to manage and regulate our emotions and our responses. So when you have had an external stimuli that has triggered a reaction, and has put you in a difficult state of emotion. It could be, say, there's a person who has a project and now they're quite anxious whether they're going to meet the deadline or not. Say someone has missed a deadline and now they're feeling some emotions. Say you were working towards a milestone and that milestone didn't come, or you were working towards, or say you trusted in something and you can no longer trust a person. Just difficult emotions. And now you're in that difficult emotion state. So how do you get out of it? So first, I have found it helpful to start drafting what that difficult state of emotion is, and that is like your lower level. And then you figure out where is it that you actually want to reach, and you start asking questions which are going to steer your brain towards the positive learning in that negative experience. Say, let's take a very simple example, on the top of my head. Say you've missed a deadline. Okay, so say you've missed a deadline, and that deadline is, um, say you've missed an important deadline, and the person you're working with didn't appreciate it. So now what do? So you sit down and write down, oh, okay, I missed a deadline. I feel quite bad about it. I feel I should have done it, and now there are all these people who are relying on me, and now they felt like I've not met a deadline, etc., etc. um, and then you start filtering it. Okay, other people's responses, reactions are not my burden as such. What is the key issue for me here? Okay, I have missed a deadline, it's making me feel a certain way, but this state is not helpful to me. Why is it not helpful for me to be in this state? So you go to the first level. Okay, why is it not helpful for me to be in this state? Because it's not helping me stay positive about tomorrow, and it's not letting me focus on my tasks, on the next tasks. Okay, the second step is, why is it important for me to focus on my next tasks? Well, if I don't focus on my next task, I'm also going to miss my next deadline. So, and do I want to miss my next deadline? I don't want to miss my next deadline. So it is important for me to be in a state of flow and to not stay stagnant. So I have to find a way of not letting this negative emotion of missing a deadline bear on me. Okay. Now, what is the consequence of missing this deadline? And sometimes honestly, the consequence is that not that much, because maybe it's an internal deadline that nobody cares about. So you're like, okay, there has been some damage, but not that much damage. Maybe the people around me feel might not. I need to make sure that um, I stand by my word. And what's the value here that's at stake? The value is that I want to be someone who sticks to my word, and I want to maintain that. So then you question as to why did I miss this deadline? And that comes from a learning sense. Okay, so what did I learn from this, and why did I miss this deadline? And maybe you could have some very valid reasons. Say you had a valid reason that I was just about to meet the deadline, but I was hit by a car and then I got hurt and I had to go to the hospital and I had to get these like treatment done and I couldn't meet the deadline. Well, in that case, it's force majeure. It's not your point, open and shut case. There's no need for me to feel bad about it because it was not in my control. I'm not going to sulk in this. It was something that was external. I couldn't have control it. No one could have control it. Yet there is, yes, there's a cost that the team has to bear, but it is something that is beyond my control. There's no reason for me to feel guilty about it. Shut and open and shut case. Get up, smile, and proceed with your daily activity. But say you realize, okay, this is something that I could have easily achieved, but I underestimated the time it would take, or I overestimated my capacity or ability to do this, or the skill set that's required to do this, or I didn't appreciate that I would need an extra pair of hands, or that I would need someone else to come in and provide their expertise. So, what have I learned from this now? And that's something that was in my control. Now, that's something we need to work on. So, what should I need to do next time? And this is where you've reached a very positive state, because now you have taken this negative experience and you've translated it into actionable steps for the future. So, you're like, okay, the next time when I get a project, I need to assess A, how long is it going to take realistically? And I can get that checked by people who have done this before if that seems right. I can set milestones in between to let people know that, okay, I've reached midway and everything is under control. I can meet the deadline. And if I can't, I should let them know in advance. Or is it, does this work require skills that I have? And if I don't, who do I need to get involved? And from experience, I should do that sooner rather than later, because if I do that later, they may not be available, or even if they are available, they just might not understand and it would just be delayed. And if you explain things like that to yourself, you have empowered yourself from this experience with a skill set that you didn't have when this experience first happened, but now you are in a better position to not let the similar situation happen. So, not only are you better equipped to deal with the scenario in the future, but you'll also be better equipped to train other people to not to fall in such a scenario, and you also know where things can go wrong. And that puts you in an empowering position. Now you feel empowered. You don't feel that, okay, I am now in this negative state and I've kind of have to stay there. You are in a positive, empowered state because you have knowledge, you have skills, you have experience. And you can also demonstrate this, your learnings, to people and your team members around you. And also share your knowledge, because when they feel, okay, they get to see your perspective. Oh, okay, this is the reason why the deadline wasn't met. Say if someone didn't know that you were hit by a car, or they would assume you've missed a deadline just because you wanted to, and no one does that. So when they know that fact, yeah, okay, now we understand it. They're not going to hold it against you. Similarly, when other people know that you have done a reflection exercise and this is how you've understood it, they're more likely to see how methodical you've been, and also how they could have helped you manage something, or their own oversight becomes visible to them. But that's not your concern. Your concern is your own emotional state, managing your own outlook. And this way, you can carve your way up from a not so great state to an empowered position with the help of journaling by asking these empowering questions. And I know some people say journaling always has to be in words, but I have found it quite useful to use flowcharts and arrows and circles in my journaling, and that really helps me. The next point about journaling is vision journaling. Now, vision journaling is also related to the second point that I mentioned, staircase journaling. But vision journaling is you use when you want to create an empowering vision. Say you find yourself in a situation that's just not psychologically safe. Say you're working in an environment that is dysfunctional, the team management is not great, and you don't feel motivated, and you don't feel like showing up, and you don't feel like progressing. You're constantly stressed, you're quite fearful, and you feel like you're stuck. Now, to get unstuck, you've got to think about a scenario where you are unstuck. What does that unstuck look like? What do you think you will be doing in that unstuck situation? So, the vision journaling is more future oriented journaling where you sit and write down, okay, I envisage things to be this. I imagine a non stress environment will look like this. This is how I would like to feel, and this is how I would like my day to turn out. And when you write that down, you get a propellant. You're not that lethargic because you're like, okay, great, now I have a vision. This is how I look like in a not in a psychologically safe space. And because you can see something so detailed, you want to try and achieve it. So you propel yourself to action, to try and achieve that state. And that could just be as simple as I should be able to get up and make coffee more often, or I should be able to make to my gym classes without feeling stressed about someone checking whether I'm in the office or not, or anything else. It could just be simple, simple things. But once you write it down, you then actively start thinking about it, and you actively start looking for a scenario where you can achieve that kind of psychological safety, and you feel that it's possible. So when you feel that, yes, it is possible to land in a psychologically safe environment, this is how it's supposed to feel, you're more likely to take steps towards it, and you're more likely to feel optimistic and positive in traversing the situation that you are in, which is temporary. So you're like, okay, this is a temporary situation that I am in. It is likely that I will land in a psychologically safe situation where I will not be stressed, where I will not be anxious, and now I just need to figure out how to get there. And that you do through your steps, plan, maps, whatever that is. But that's not journaling. Journaling is just putting down your desires, your vision as to what things are going to look like, and that helps you to take action. That vision is important. And the fourth one that I find super important, or has really, really helped me, is the identity journaling. Um, and I think in today's world, there's so much noise, and there's people are just so opinionated, and everybody's always talking, sometimes not thinking, and there's so much information, there's so much misinformation. The odds of you being defined by others is just very high. So, say you walk into a room and there are 10 people, and 10 different people have 10 different perceptions of who you are. And sometimes you can't help but get lost in other people's perception of who you are or who you should be, how you ought to act, what you should be prioritizing, or who you should be. And that's confusing because that may or may not resonate with how you view yourself or how you want to view yourself. In that situation, it really helps to do this identity journaling when you say get up every morning and write down, this is who I am. These are my core values. This is what I aspire for. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't work for me. And then try and align your actions with that version of who you think you are and who is it that you want to be. And that may or may not match the perception of other people, but it is good because it keeps you grounded in what is it that you want and what is it that you aspire to be, as opposed to matching the expectations of 100 people around you. And don't get me wrong here, it's not, I think there's a difference between being completely oblivious to how you're being perceived, which I don't think is good either, because sometimes social feedback can be quite useful in aligning your behavior or in tuning yourself to become a version that's conducive to the community that you're a part of. Because at the end of the day, no one is here to live by themselves. We all are a part of a society, we're all a part of a network. And there's a lot of value in us collaborating with each other and progressing to achieve things together. But it should not be taken to the extreme that the only way you see yourself is through other people, or the only way you are defined is through other people. At all times, it's important to have your definition as to who you are and what matters to you and what you stand for in your control. It should be your say. You shouldn't let other people write the definition of you in their dictionary. You have to do it, and for that, it's important to first understand who you are. And you get a better understanding of who you are by doing these identity journaling, where each time you have taken a decision that's been quite difficult, you try and analyze, why did I do it? What was the value I was looking into it? Say you've turned up that, say you prefer, you go, you, okay, I'm really struggling to find an example from the top of my head here. But say you've been invited to a party and you decide to dress very simply, or you decide to dress up uh, in a very glitzy manner. So there are two people. One decides to dress up quite simply, one decides to dress up with all the glitz and glamour. And each of them turn up, and different people have different perceptions about them. Some people will view the glitz and glamour in a negative manner, some people will view the simple dressing in a negative manner. Now, we can let these 10 people define why someone chose to do what they did, wear what they did, and what does that represent about this one person. But you have got to go back and ask yourself, why did I decide to pick a certain outfit for a certain event? What was the value I was trying to achieve? And maybe you dressed simply that day because you heard a bad news and you wanted to just stay low key and not make a big fuss out of it because you didn't feel like it, but that's not exactly your style. So if some people thought that that's how you dress generally, it's their problem, not yours, because that's not who you are. Similarly, the one who dressed up in a glitz and glam manner, some people might be like, oh, okay, she was such a show off, she was this, she was that. But you come back and you decide, why did I dress up in that glitz and glam manner? Was I trying to show off? Was I trying to make a point? Probably not. I do it just because I enjoy dressing up and I like the glitz and I like the glam and I like the shimmer. So why not go for it? And if that is probably your style, and you should just own it comfortably, and not be concerned about what other people think. And I think that is important, because I guess if you come to the conclusion that I dress in the glitz and glam manner because I wanted to fit in, but that's not really my style, then you're kind of going away from your identity and you need to embrace your identity a bit more. Simply, if you feel like I dressed up simply because I didn't really want to dress up glitz and glam because people might think I'm showing off, that's again not who you are. And if you are that glitz and glam person, then you need to be that glitz and glam person. Don't dull your glitz and glam just to fit in, and also don't feel the need to be glitz and glam just because you think that your style of dressing doesn't have uh, will not get you the kind of acceptance that you're looking for, because maybe you'll be accepted or you get that sense of belonging in a different setting, but you don't want to compromise your identity just for the sake of it. So for me, identity journaling helps quite a bit there to figure out why I took certain decisions, what was the value I was striving for, why I'm doing something, where am I feeling that I'm taking decisions out of peer pressure, where do I think I'm taking decisions because it's aligned with who I want to be, and just generally making sure that at all times I am in control of trying to define, of understanding who I am, and I'm not letting other people's perceptions and other people's opinions cloud my own perception of myself. Like, don't let others cloud the mirror that you see in, and that has to be an honest mirror. And it can only be as honest as we are willing to be with ourselves. So, if we are honest in our reflective exercises, in our search for identity, we are more likely to get an honest reflection. And that is more likely to help us um, make the changes we need to be more in tune with who we are and who we want to be. Well, this is a very simplistic explanation of how I've used journaling. It's way more detailed, and I think it would definitely make more sense to do more specific exercises. And I'm more than happy to talk about it, but you need to tell me if that is what you want me to do. Today, the episode has gone on very long, so I am not going to go and read a big extract, but a ritual is a ritual. So, we are going to read a small extract. And this is, again, we're reading the book Start with the Why by Simon Sinek. And this is the chapter, The Emergence of Trust. And I'm reading this paragraph at page 113, which says, So many decisions are based on an advertising industry measurement called a Q score, a quotient of how well recognized a celebrity is, how famous they are, so to speak. The higher the score, the better the unaided awareness of the celebrity. This information alone is not enough. The clearer the spokesperson's own why is understood, the better ambassador they can be for a like minded brand or company. But there is no measurement of celebrities' why currently available, so the result is obvious. The value of too many celebrity endorsements is the celebrity appeal alone. Unless the audience to which you are trying to appeal gets a sense of what the spokesperson believes, unless that spokesperson is one of us, the enforcement may drive recognition, it may even drive sales for the short term, but it will fail to build trust. And I think this relates to what I was talking about in my last point, that it's important for you to feel safe within yourself and feel that I can at least be honest with myself. And that I think always starts with the why. And it starts with the why in your journal. This is a small part, but you can also use this for journaling. So the more honest you are with your why, the more trust you will develop with yourself. And I guess once you develop trust within yourself, you automatically start reflecting trust on the outside. Even if you're not in a psychologically safe space, you will end up striving towards a space that makes you feel more psychologically safe. So I hope this was able to help you, and I'm more than happy to do more detailed episodes on this if you're finding it valuable. So let me know if that is so. Until then, I hope you take a journal and try with some of the exercises and see how you get along. So take care, and I will see you in the next episode.